Hello everyone, this is us again. This is RP Lab, Rapid Prototyping Lab at ERAU Prescott. Here I am with another one of my great technicians, Mr. Jameson. And he's going to talk about one of the 3D printers that a bunch of you might have or decide to buy maybe for this Christmas or anything, right? It's the Creality printer, which is a very affordable yet really good, reliable printer. So I'll pass it all to Jameson to introduce this printer to you, both hardware and software, and get you started. So Jameson, class is yours.
Right. Hi, I'm Jameson. I'm one of the technicians here at the Rapid Prototyping Lab. This is a Creality Ender-3. This is the Pro V2 model. This is one of the higher-end models that Creality offers for the Ender-3 line. However, there are ones that are cheaper for around $180. This one tends to run upwards of $275 or $300 depending on where you find it. That's still extremely affordable as opposed to even 3D printers from a few years ago. The reason that it's so cheap is because that you have to assemble it as a kit yourself. However, it comes 80% assembled. You just have to attach the gantry arms, the lead screw, or the Z screw, and the top bar. Other than that, it is almost completely assembled, and it gives you a bit of a hands-on experience, which allows for better maintenance in the future if you have any trouble.
So here we are going to show you the monitor and some hardware setup, and then we go next to Cura and the software. So class is yours again.
So just for demonstration purposes, I have already preheated. However, when you do want to load and unload the filament, you will go to Prepare, and then go down to Preheat PLA or Preheat ABS, depending on what filament you're using. However, we are using PLA, so you click on that. It would start to heat up. After about a minute or so, when it's done moving, you go to the Move option, and we'll go to the extruder. We'll load it into the side, over here. And as we move the extruder motor, the wheel will turn and will feed the filament. However, you can do it a bit quicker by pushing down on the tab on the arm and just feeding it manually yourself. However, it's good practice to do a bit of the machine fed. You will want to move the Z-axis up a tiny little bit. Same way, just kind of come over here, go up to the Z, click, and just move the Z-axis up. I tend to bring it to around 50. And I'll start to move the Z-axis up. While we're waiting for that, I'll explain the Z-axis a tiny bit. So the Z-axis, it works on a wheel system, which is quite unique actually. I really like the system. It uses belts to pull on the gantry, and then it uses the wheels to create pressure on the gantry bars. This is also how the bed axis and the x-axis moves. Now, with the Z-axis up, we can start extruding until we get a tiny bit of filament out of the nozzle. There we go. So a little bit of a string coming out of the nozzle. You can see that. But once that happens, then we are ready to print. As for unloading, it's quite simple. What you want to do is a tiny little bit of an extrusion, just to get any back pressure that's come from like the print or anything like that, just to let it clear out so that it doesn't get caught in the tube. After that, you can extrude backwards. And then once that's done, you can pull the filament out. And of course, once you pull the filament out, make sure you put the filament tab into the little hole in the side. Most spools come with them, but if they don't, tape also works fine. Just make sure that you're keeping it taut, so that way it doesn't tangle. Alright, so now I'm going to show you how to start a print. So, once you have your files all loaded up, which I will show you in just a tiny bit of how to actually slice a file and get them all prepared for the Ender-3, you'll go into the print menu right here on the upper left, start a print, and you'll see all your files on your SD card right here. The Ender-3 does have the capabilities of being hooked up to the Octoprint system on the Raspberry Pi. However, it just comes with a standard micro SD card, which is plenty enough for a beginner. Once you find your print, for example, we'll just go with the dog2h, which is dog 2 hours. You will start that, and it will start preheating. Once it's done preheating for the set temperature, it will start going. Of course, won't let it run the entire time. However, that is how you start it. So in here, you'll have 3 options. So stop, if you want to stop your print entirely, if something's going wrong, if it's starting to spaghettify, or anything's going wrong with it. That's the option for you. If you want to pause, just because you need to adjust something, switch out filament, or anything that you know that you'll be coming back to your print later, that also is a good option. And the most in-depth option that we have available is the tune option, which allows us to change things on the fly. So we have printing speed, which just adjusts the speed that it prints at. 100% is, of course, the set speed, but if you need something to print a bit slower, or anything like that, that's where you'll adjust it. Some parts, such as like thin parts, may need a bit of a slower speed, which definitely can really be useful to change. Nozzle temperature, if you set something up wrong, or you think that you need to go a bit higher, a bit lower, with your current temperature settings, that's where you'd go. Bed temperature, usually, especially with like something like PLA, you don't need to change the bed temperature too much. And then the fan speed, depending on like the part that you're printing, you may or may not want part cooling. It kind of just comes down to trial and error, find out like which speed that you like. I tend to keep it at 100%. This one is going at 0%, because that is what Creality set up for their part. So the Z offset is how you will adjust where your nozzle is relative to the bed. This really is useful just in case you haven't really done your bed leveling really well, or if you notice that doesn't have what's known as squish in the community, which is basically just the way that the filament comes out onto the bed. With PLA, you want it to be squished down a tiny little bit. You don't really want it to be perfectly cylindrical when coming out as a print. If you notice this, and you don't really want to stop a print, you can just adjust it up or down relative to where the filament is coming out on the bed. Normally, you wouldn't really need to touch this setting, but if you notice something at the beginning of your print, and you don't really feel like going through leveling again, that can be a really quick fix. As for actually leveling the bed, the V2 is a bit easier to level, just because you can move it to set spots. However, there is 2 different ways you can do it. You can do it by moving the bed to those specific spots, or you can do it by adjusting the head and the bed over to where you need to adjust it to. So first thing you want to do is go back to the prepare screen, where you preheated the PLA and moved the filament into the extruder. And then you want to go to Auto Home, which will start moving it to its origin points, and from there you can start leveling the bed. The Ender-3 goes based off of a 4-spring system, so it has a spring and a wheel in all 4 corners of it. So what you'll do is that you'll use a piece of printer paper, which is some standard A4 printer paper, and then once you have that, and you have it auto homed, you'll go to disable steppers, and you'll go to move, and this is outlined in the manual. However, you can go to 3030 and 3205, and the two matching diagonal coordinates as well. So 3030, 3205, 20530, and 205 205. But once you do that, we'll start with the 3030, which is going to be the one in the left corner. Once you do that, you'll take the piece of paper, slide it underneath the nozzle. So this has a bit of tension on it. You want to adjust the wheels. So going counterclockwise moves it down, clockwise moves it up. So with this one, I want to move it down because I can't even get the piece of paper into there. So with this, once you get it going, you want to move it a tiny bit, and you'll feel for friction. So you just want the tiniest little bit of friction, so just as you start to feel friction, that's perfect. So once you get that, move to the next step. So I'm going to go 3205 as my second one. So I'm just going in a clockwise fashion.
How many points do you need for leveling? How many points on the bit?
4.
4 points.
However, if you upgrade with a what's known as a BL Touch for an extra $50, it will do this for you by using mesh leveling. So you can take out a lot of the guesswork. You still do need to do a tiny bit of leveling at the beginning, but that's a bit of a different process. However, it does make a lot of difference. It is one of the first upgrades that be done outside of perhaps the tubing upgrade. These are just the stock tubes, but the Ender-3 is known for its modding capabilities. You can put a lot of different things onto the Ender. So with this, again, that's a bit tight. I'll just adjust it down a tiny bit. And that's a bit loose. I'll just keep on adjusting until I feel a tiny bit of friction. And it is just the tiniest little bit of friction.
Okay, so now we move to the Ultimaker Cura, which is a typical software used for Creality Ender, and Jameson will explain to you how to bring apart a slice it and the settings for that. Please go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. So this is the slicer. So this is how you take a 3D model and turn it into a printable model. So in this one, I just have an example of what's known as a calibration cube, and that is what I recommend you print first on your printer, just due to, especially the nature of the Ender-3, where you have to assemble it yourself a tiny bit. So it kind of gives you an idea of if your printer is working properly. So this is a 20mm by 20mm by 20mm cube. So that allows you to measure it after it's done printing to make sure that it's printed at the right dimensions, or if anything's going wrong with it. So Ultimaker is absolutely great. This is what I use for my own personal Ender-3, especially due to the fact that you don't have to set up really anything. So you can come into the when you first set up Cura, it will make you add in a new printer. I already have a few printers in here for my own personal use, or for the lab use, I mean. But what you will do is you come here, you'll have a menu like this, and then you'll scroll down to the non-network printers, and Creality already has a profile in here, along with a lot of other companies, and they have all their printers available in here, but you want to do the Creality Ender-3 or Creality Ender-3 Pro, depending on which version you buy. They're both quite similar, but they do have some different settings on there, but for the most part they are absolutely perfect for this machine, and you can adjust from prints that you do. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the standard settings that come with it, and I'm going to come down to the bottom and click on Slice. What that does is it turns it into the 3D printable model, which gives it the different layers. So with this, you can see the cube with its different layers, and it's already different. What I'll do is I'll come down to here, save the file, and I already have my SD card already put into here. And I'll save it as a cube, or I'll name it as a cube.
So they're using a micro SD card, the small ones, right? So if
Yes.
you need to buy a USB SD card adapter, you need to make sure it gets both the regular and definitely for this case a micro SD card. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Okay.
Yes. And these ones come with the adapters and their own SD card. However, the adapters have been known to fail, so it is worthwhile to buy a better adapter. So once that's done, and it's been moved over to the SD card, we can take the SD card and bring it over to our printer. And then we just insert it into the slot over here. And with that, just as I was saying earlier, with the print menu, we can now see our queue right on there. We scroll down to it, and we start it. The printer has not been preheated, however, it will start preheating really quickly. The bed takes the longest part, however, once the bed is done heating, the nozzle starts heating, and it takes about 30 to 45 seconds to finish heating. While we wait for that, I'll talk about the pros and cons between the Ender-3 system or perhaps another popular printer, such as the Prusa 3, or the Prusa i3. So the Prusa 3s, they are expensive, but you will get more for your money. However, where the Ender-3 really shines is its low price, and also its, while it doesn't have as many features as the Prusa, it definitely gives you that still hands-on experience and allows you to upgrade it to match what the Prusa has. So you can upgrade for a direct drive, or you can upgrade for a filament write-out sensor, or as I was saying earlier, the BL Touch, which allows you to have that better bed leveling, or the bed printing. So while you are losing out with the stock Ender-3, what you would actually get with the Prusa, there definitely is potential with the Enders. The best part about the Enders is their low entry cost, which makes it perfect for a first-time printer, or for a Christmas gift, whether for yourself or for another, or not even Christmas. It can just be if you wanted to get into the 3D printing field. It's a really good starting point, just because with the kit style, it allows you to really get that kind of hands-on experience while still having most of it assembled. So that kind of gives you more knowledge if you need to maintenance it.
Let me ask you a question about the learning curve. Between Prusa and Ender, which one takes more time to really master it and use it?
It depends. So the Ender, if you have very little mechanical experience, the Ender is definitely a lot easier to master outside the box, just due to how much of it comes assembled, so that it takes out a lot of the guesswork. However, if you're looking for more of a STEM focused, or if you actually have the money for the Prusa, you can either buy it in kit or pre-assembled. However, the pre-assembled does cost an extra $200 for them to assemble it for you, so that brings up the cost quite a bit. However, I do recommend saving that extra $200, because if you want to sit down, assemble your printer, it is very easy to follow the instructions and get it all assembled. Both printers, they have great online communities, so if you have any questions or any concerns or anything goes wrong with your machines, you can find answers fairly easily.
We tried to put a link for the Creality support community in the video description for you, so you can see that. So hardware-wise, it is a little bit harder to work with Prusa because it has so many components, and especially if you want to assemble it yourself, you have to follow a 120-page instruction. But about software, if you want to compare Cura versus Prusa Slicer, what would you say? Which one is easier to work with, or which one has like more features, more capabilities?
I would say that in terms of software, the Prusa definitely outshines the Ender. While Cura is great, you have to do a lot of fiddling with the settings to get it working properly. While the Prusa Slicer was made by Prusa for their printers, so it takes out a lot of the guesswork, and also it works with the printers.
So a customized software for that hardware versus a basically one for all software, right? Cura, you can use it for almost all kind of printers, right? Because they
Yes.
have so many profiles. But Prusa is just for Prusa.
Yes.
And in terms of, if you want to say about reliability and surface quality and so on, how would you compare the two?
Before I get into that, I actually will say one thing. So the Prusa Slicer, they actually have teamed up with Creality. It's still in beta currently, but they are supporting the Ender-3 currently with the Prusa Slicer, so it is definitely worthwhile to check out and experiment with. However, with the surface quality, they're about the same. It kind of comes down to how you level your bed or what material you use for your bed. But in terms of the stock beds that come with the printers, so the Ender-3 V2 comes with a glass bed, while the Ender-3 V1 comes with a PEI sheet. The Prusas come with a flexible PEI sheet, which is amazing, and I love the flexible sheets just because it makes it a lot easier to remove stubborn prints instead of having to use a paint scraper or something similar to remove the print.
So how would you assure bed adhesion in Ender? What do you use, like a spray, a glue, or anything?
Yeah, so definitely. With beds, it tends to be a lot better if you actually use. The community standard is Aquanet, which it's a great hairspray for you spray it onto your bed, and it helps helps adhere it. And it's a lot better than using Elmer's glue stick on your bed, just due to being a lot easier to remove residue from the hairspray as opposed to glue stick or other similar adhesion methods.
So we use the same hairspray that we use for Prusa, we can use for Ender, basically.
Definitely.
That's the top choice.
Definitely.
I see. Okay. And do you remember what is the minimum layer height that you can go with Ender? For Prusa is 0.05, right? Ultra detail.
Yes.
So what is it for Ender? Do you know?
Ender, where you start to lose, before you actually have to mod your printer, it gets down to about 0.16. So 160 microns is still insanely great for detail, but
I see. So like twice as much.
Yes.
So 0.05 versus 0.1, which is still, I mean, for the price of it, 0.1 is really good. With MakerBot, you cannot even go in that range. So now we have the printer in action. It is printing, and while it is printing, would you explain the roles of these blue bolts that you have on the sides? What is it that you are doing with them?
Yeah, so these are the belt tensioners. So if you find any problems with your belts or anything like that, you can definitely, it's good practice to tighten your belt as you go along. Alright, welcome back. We had to stop the print for a moment just due to it failing, so that's what I was talking about with the bed adhesion. As it prints, you do want to plate the wheels a tiny bit to adjust that squish. So, as we were talking about with these blue wheels on the end, this is great with the Ender-3 V2, is that they added in these little tensioning arms. With the Ender-3 V1, you just had to do it manually, which wasn't too bad either. It was just loosening a single Allen bolt and just pulling on it until you have the right tension. However, with these, it is extremely important to keep printer belts tuned and tight, but not too tight. So it just kind of comes down to the way that the pulleys will move the gantry arm and the bed. It just helps it move properly. So if it's too loose, it will cause skipping in your prints, or if it's too tight, it will cause weird deformities in your print. So it kind of comes down to making sure that they're tight, but not too tight. You can usually do this, especially with this one, by pushing on it. It should have a bit of a give, but not too much of a give, but also not be extremely tight to the point where you can't move it.
Now, a few other questions. So with Prusa, you can control the print speed both in the software and on the hardware with the monitor.
Yes.
You can also change the flow rate, right? Make more plastic to come out of the nozzle or not. And like temperature and everything. not only can change in the software, it can also change with the monitor. Do you have those capabilities right here on the monitor here, the controller here?
Yeah, so I talked about this really briefly earlier, but I can definitely go over it again a bit more in depth.
Just if you just show us where to go, then I'm sure they can follow along.
So the nice thing about the V2 is you actually can remove your screen if you need to mount it elsewhere or just kind of move it. So while you're printing, you go into the tune settings. And for print speed, it's the first setting right here. So let's say we wanted to bring this down to 50%. Let's say it was a very, very thin wall.
How much can you go above 100%? Can you?
I believe so, yes.
Like with Prusa, I can go 180 or something very fast. There we go. Yes.
You can get up to...
Oh, wow. You can go to 500%.
Yep.
That's insanely fast and a good chance of failure, huh?
Yes, very much so.
So the good idea is do not really change it much beyond or below 100, right?
Yes.
And you have the nozzle temperature on it, the bed temperature, the fan speed, and the Z offset. So those are the options under the tune. And if you go back, then we have the pause and stop, correct?
Yes.
And these are the main things that you see under the screen while the printing action is ongoing, correct?
Yes.
When you stop it, then you should be able to see more options, right? Good. So here, the printer is stopped, and now it is doing auto homing, right? And then it is going to try to cool off. So you see there is a print, there is a prepare, which is really about preheating and loading and unloading. The print itself is the area that you read from a SD card, correct? And then controls is basically like temperature, motion, storage configuration, read configuration, and reset configuration.
This is more the back-end firmware. So you can adjust different things in the settings. So if you want to change how your preheat PLA option goes to, you could definitely do that. So you can set it up to, let's say you're using tough PLA, which needs 220 degrees thing. I personally use that. So actually in mine, I have changed my preheat to heat up to 220 instead of 200. So we don't have to wait a tiny bit longer for my nozzle to heat when I want to print.
So you do that preheat change in temperature here on the monitor?
Yes. So
Okay.
you can go down to preheat PLA settings,
I see.
and then you can change all of your settings,
Okay.
which is really nice that they have that in here.
Okay. It's amazing. It's a ton of information about a printer that is showing a bunch of capabilities and promise, and not as expensive as Prusa, although of course you're going to lose some capabilities. You're going to lose a bunch of automatic features like, as he correctly mentioned, mesh bed leveling, right? Automatic tension checking on the belts, the checking on the filament and so on. But many of those, if you add the extra hardware or software, you can get the capability. You have to pay some extra money. And one last thing that you saw, just want to emphasize, is the head is in two pieces. There is one part here that is just melting, and there is this part on the back with the stepper motor that pulls in the filament. In many of the printers, these two are combined into a single piece. Here they are done in two separate pieces, but if you see the actions of the X, Y, and Z axis are the same, and you have the filament holder down there. One last question I have is comparing the plastics that they can print. Could you compare the number of plastics that Ender can print versus Prusa iMaker?
Yeah, so definitely. So the Prusas are out of the box able to print out quite a few extra filaments. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're able to print it well, but they are able to print it fairly decently. However, with the Ender-3, really you're only able to print out PETG, ABS, and PLA without having to do too much modification. However, your mileage may vary with different filaments. It's always great to experiment with different filaments in the 3D printing world. Just make sure that you know your settings and how it might affect your nozzle, because with the brass nozzles, of course, it can cause issues with some filaments. Same with the Prusas as well, they come with brass nozzles, so it's kind of comes down to experimentation. The big one that you really can't print on the Ender-3 without doing modifications is flexible filament, which you can do right out of the box on Prusas. That's just due to the nature of the filament. With it being flexible, it's a lot harder for it to push it through the tube as opposed to a direct drive.
So no TPU, no flex, right?
Yeah, no TPU
for these
out of the box. It does require a tiny bit of modification, but it's not too bad. It's one little print, and you swap out a piece. So if you're comfortable doing that, it's quite easy.
I understand. Okay. Okay, really appreciate all the time that you gave to us. Is there any final notes or anything you want to add before we end up the video?
Definitely. So it's always good to keep an eye on the 3D printing world. The Ender-3s have made huge leaps and bounds in terms of the development of 3D printers, and it's been really neat to actually see these come into the market only a few years ago. So about 6 or 7 years ago, something of this size would have cost $700, $800 for right around the same features and everything like that. So now that money will get you something that's the Prusa. So it's been really quite fascinating to see how it's evolved.
Okay, thank you so much, Jameson, for all your time and all the information you gave us about Creality. And I'll see you all in my next video.